Good morning, guys. I think you're probably wondering, well, why are you starting at 10:35? It's okay. We have been to the 4-H fairground and got to spend some quality time with family and got to show some cows, and the girls get a big kick out of that. And it's just fun watching family and interact with the 4-H festivities. So it was good, really good. This is this was a perfect opportunity for me to do an intro because we're not going to dive into the book of Revelation today. I want to give you a general overview for 20 minutes. And my goal is to do the book of Revelation in 2 to 3 months, just like we did Romans, and do probably more than a chapter a day. Revelation is broke up into 7 sections, pretty well agreed upon by commentators that it's agreed upon that there's 7 sections. You can break Revelation up into 2 divisions, chapters 1 through 11, and then chapter 12 through 22. There are 7 divisions, at least the way that I've got it written down here. And the first being chapter 1 through chapter 3. That's Jesus, an introduction of who Jesus is, and that he is walking among the golden lampstands, among the churches. Hello, Miss Annabee. Feeling better? Having a little allergic reaction to the hay today? Straw? Did you have a good time showing cows? Good job.
I got a first place ribbon.
First place ribbon today. Well, I think you had some help. Who was the one really walking?
My cousin Addie.
Addie was
I had to pull it too. I had to pull it.
I think you watch her close. You'll learn a lot from Miss Addie. Good job. Proud of you. And then in the second section, so I'd like for you to read the first 3 chapters for next Wednesday.
This is my first place ribbon.
There's our ribbon.
Emma got a second place.
That's right. Who'd she walk with?
I think she walked with Bryson.
Wow, what great cousins. They're so good to you. All right, so then I would like for us to read the first 3 chapters for next Wednesday, and my plan is to do one section a week, or maybe a section in 2 weeks. But that way, it won't take us too long to. I think sometimes when we get bogged down in the details, you never really get the gist of Revelation. So what I want to say to you, I want to tell you what the sections are, and then I want to make a couple of basic comments, and then I want to close it out and give you a chance to read these chapters before we get too far into any section. So one more time, there's 7 sections, 2 divisions. The 7 sections, before I give you those, each section is running parallel to the others. I really do believe Revelation is something that's been made to be almost impossible to understand. Can you imagine the first century readers having to figure out all these charts and futurists that are trying to make it all out into the future, and yet it's supposed to be a blessing to them? I won't say a whole lot about that. It's just frustrating to me to see how the book of Revelation is treated a majority of the time. And it's absolutely impossible for it to be a blessing to any of us other than just saying, hey, Jesus wins in the end, which is really what Revelation is about. We start trying to figure out, by using symbolic language, everything is treated like an allegory. Every part of every story or every section is supposed to be something specific. You know, Gorbachev was the Antichrist. Donald Trump is an Antichrist. Uh, that Russia is this and America is that. It's foolishness. I'm just telling you, it's just foolishness. And no wonder the book just can't be understood. It's the way that it's being taught. So let me do my best to try to help make this a book that is a blessing to you, a book that you go to as much as any other to share the gospel with someone. I think the book of Romans and the book of Revelation ought to be right on the frontal lobe of our minds. We should go to it often. But unfortunately, it's treated like a futurist book. And I realize there are those that treat it like it's all already happened, a preterist view. And that's equally wrong. That's equally wrong. Are there events that pertain to the coming of Christ the first time? Yes. But there are events that pertain also specifically to the second coming of Christ. But most of the symbolic language, and by the way, there are two ways to look at symbolic language. There's symbolic language that speaks to a specific event, and there's symbolic language that speaks to a general ongoing type or principle. You might say, boy, I used to have a coach that's crazy as a bat. You're speaking of a particular coach. You didn't tell us who it was, but it's pretty easy for us to figure out. If we think back about all your coaches, we figure out, yep, that coach was crazy. Therefore, he's not a bat. He didn't fly around crazy like a bat. We know he's not a literal bat. But symbolically, you were saying that particular coach was a bat. And so, obviously, when we use symbolic language about Jesus, and it tells he's a flaming fire, obviously Jesus his hair wasn't on fire. He talks about Jesus being the Lamb of God in chapter 5, going and taking the scroll. No, Jesus is not a lamb. He's not a lamb, a literal lamb, but it's talking about a specific person at a specific time when Jesus came on the earth the first time. That type of thing, walking among the churches, is an ever-going thing. So he walks along golden lampstands. Are churches golden lampstands, like literally golden lampstands? No, it's symbolic. But Jesus is ongoingly, it's a particular person, Jesus Christ, ongoing, though, walking among the churches today, even in first century, even today. But then there will be language about the beast coming out of the sea and the beast coming out of the land. Babylon. It's not talking about literal Babylon. People will say, yeah, they're rebuilding Babylon over there at Iraq. That really is modern day Babylon. It's ridiculousness. It is outright ridiculous to do that. Babylon is the harlot of the world that is selling its goods to the believers to distract the believers from sharing the gospel. And that has been ongoing ever since the first coming of Christ. But if we if we also make the mistake of allegorizing, we make a mistake. If you take different parts and try to give it meaning, let's say we go back, it's just like a parable. If you go to a parable, let's say the Good Samaritan, and you try to figure out, okay, the Good Samaritan lesson is the priest represents this, the actual Good Samaritan represents this, the fallen Samaritan represents all of us who are in Adam. I mean, the fallen man on the road that was beat up and left for dead. He represents us sinners. And then when they get on, he puts him on his camel, that represents this. And then when he gets to that house, that represents somehow the church. And then there's he leaves 2 denarii for him to be taken care of, which represents 1,000 years apiece. So it'll be 2,000 years before Christ comes back. Pretty soon, you've picked that parable apart, and a guy told me this week, he said, yeah, when I was in school, we had to take a Bible class, and we learned about most of the Bible's just allegories. No, it's not. There's no allegories in the Bible. Not one single allegory in the Bible. You look at all the literary styles, and there's no such thing as allegorizing any passage of Scripture. But we do this with parables because it sounds good. You can write books about it, and everybody goes, wow, look at that. That's so introspective. You figured out every part of that story represents something. Huge mistake. No way the authors ever intended on that happening to these stories. So when we get in the book of Revelation, you got to fight against these prognosticators trying to figure out when you're looking at everything that's happening in the book of Revelation, you start to pull apart pieces, trying to figure out what each horse is and what each trumpet is and what each of this is and what each of that is. Pretty soon, you pull the pieces away from the overall section. What is that section saying? And so hopefully that helps a little bit. It lets you off the hook. We're not trying to figure out every little thing. That's not the point of the passage. Just like in the parable of the Good Samaritan, what's the point? The point is that everyone that God puts in your path is your neighbor. Don't just say, well, I got a neighbor on this side of me and a neighbor on that side of me, and that's all I have as a neighbor. No, it's not. The person you work with at work, that's your neighbor. The person you go to the store and see every day because y'all go to the store every week, same day, same time, that's your neighbor. Anyone you run across on a regular basis, your family or whatever, that's your neighbor. And that's the point Jesus is making. But you pull that whole parable apart, now you're nowhere close to what the original intended meaning of that parable was. And that's what happens so often when the book of Revelation is taught. What are the sections? Let's break them down. There are 7. Chapters 1 through 3, Jesus is Jesus is walking in the middle of the lampstands. What does that mean? God is in our presence. God is in the presence of the churches. There are 7 churches in Asia. I don't want to get too much into the detail. There are far more than 7 churches in Asia Minor, but 7 represents completeness. So the point is, Jesus is with all the churches. He's walking in amongst the churches. The second section we'll get to is chapter 4 through chapter 7. And that's a vision of heaven and the seals. The seals, the bowls, and the trumpets. Yes, one of the sections takes us beyond all the way to the judgment, but they're still parallel sections. The trumpets, the bowls, the seals are parallel. It's called circular parallelism. How can I put that? In the beginning of the Bible, when you'll get a broad overview of creation in the first of Genesis. It's just an overview and then it circles back around and it'll give a different detail. That's why it seems like there's contradictions, but there's not. It's called circular or circle back around and tell a detail about the same story you've already talked about. So the seals, the bowls, and the trumpets are telling the same they're talking about the same time frame. They're only giving different details of what happens during that time. What time frame are we talking about, Tim? We're talking about from the first coming of Christ to the second coming of Christ. And if you can get this in your head, if you get this down, oh, so the bowls, the trumpets, the seals, those aren't way out in the future. Those have been going on since the first coming of Christ. It's going to open up the book of Revelation in a way that maybe you've never read it before. And you'll see that this has been going on since the beginning. And those churches don't represent different ages necessarily over the 2,000 years since Christ first came. They represent the state of churches, the different the different conditions churches find themselves in. I got no problem if somebody wants to say, well, yeah, but boy, we sure are in the Laodicean church age. We're in that last church. We're cold toward Christ. But, you know, when you look at every church, you could look at different times in the life of that church that it was hot for Christ and then it's cold for Christ. Churches will go cold and then have revival and come back and be like, you know, they left their first love, like the Ephesus church, but then they come back and they're on fire for Christ. So really, these lampstands, Christ is walking among the lampstands because there are different times in different days since the time Christ came that the church has found itself going in and out of persecution, in and out of dedication to Christ. And so it's far better, rather than try to figure out what age is what. Okay, this happened in the first 500 years since Christ. This happened in this last 500 years. And so Christ may be coming back any second now because we're in this age. It's better to know that there will always be churches that turn into a synagogue of Satan. Churches that are just no longer about the gospel anymore. There's no gospel at all. And at least it brings you some salve to your soul to know that these conditions that these churches show us happen to different churches in different ways.
The doorbell rang?
Oh, did it? Well, I won't be able to go right now, so that's all right. Maybe they'll just leave the package up there. So you guys watch your show, okay? Good job.
Is it my turn to the outside yet?
Yeah, you can watch it. Yeah. Okay, so chapter 4 through chapter 7 is the vision of heaven and the seals. Chapters 8 through 11 will be the 7 trumpets. You guys probably have read it before, so you know this. But then we have chapters 12 through 14, and it's the persecuting dragon. There's going to be 5 main enemies. We're going to have a dragon. We're going to have the beast of the sea, the beast of the land. We're actually going to see one of the main enemies of the church will be those that take the sign of the beast. What will be this sign of the beast? You know, one of the saddest things I see is when people are trying to figure out, is it a microchip or is it this or like a literal physical sign? Guys, that's exactly what I'm talking about getting us all off course and getting us distracted. The sign of the beast has been going on ever since the beginning. Does this make sense? Ever since Christ came the first time, the sign of the beast is what the book of Hebrews talks about. There will be those who will, there's no other sacrifice left for them. They have come to the precipice of believing. They've gotten so close to trusting in Christ alone for their salvation. And then they turn away and turn toward works. And so what we see today, the worst enemy of believers today, do you know what it would be? It would be the same people that sort of Paul dealt with when he said there's a messenger of Satan, a thorn in my flesh in Corinthians, where the super apostles came in and they tried to distract the true believers or tried to fool the true believers into giving them works-oriented salvation, or you can prove you're a super Christian if you do certain things. Those people, you begin to see pretty significantly, they send off signals or signs that they are of that camp. And there's no greater modus operandi for Satan against Christ than those that come into the church and teach a false gospel. It's anything other than the finished work of Jesus Christ. Galatians, they bewitched the Galatians, Paul says. Who has bewitched you? By bringing in this law-keeping salvation message. Guys, that's the sign of the beast. This idea that Satan is down at the brothel getting men to fall physically. No, that would be Babylon, the harlot Babylon. That would be the beast of the land, the beast of the sea. We'll get to those things. But the dragon's attack, the sign of the beast we're going to get to, about the time we get to chapters 10, 11, 12, we get in there. We're going to be looking at, let me do it this way. In the first 11 chapters, we're going to see man's attack, dealing with man, that the church, the true believers, are persecuted by the world. Okay? That would be people that have political power, governmental power, and they seek out Christians and kill them. Paul being, obviously, when he was Saul, the first one that comes to mind, right? Persecuting the church. And guys, that's been going on since the coming of Christ, the first coming of Christ. Now, obviously, we see pictures of this in the Old Testament. I'm not dismissing the Old Testament. In fact, there's a point where we're going to read a prayer of Moses. So there's, well, it's just filled with Old Testament references, allusions. I mean, it's not quoting the Old Testament, but it's going to allude to Old Testament over and over and over. And we're going to be able to understand the book of Revelation by understanding the stories of the Old Testament. Does this make sense? So if you read the book of Revelation, knowing what happened with, say, Moses, you'll begin to understand that it's not the attack of man. The attack that we're going through with your boss, or if you're in a certain country where the leaders of the country want to destroy Christians and burn their houses down, imprison them, or worse. You'll know in chapters 12 through 22 why we're being physically attacked in chapters 1 through 11. There's spiritual warfare going on. In my life, I've had grown adults in the name of religion to wag their finger in my face and absolutely attack me. I have been physically hurt, accosted, run over. I've been choked. I've been spit on, had a gun in my face for Christ. But it does our hearts good. It's salve to the soul to know that the reason chapters 1 through 11 of Revelation happen, the physical things happen, the reason Saul waged war on the church is because he was doing the bidding of Satan. So chapters 12 through 22 are going to show us, you start in chapter 12 with the child is born, and since he can't get the child because the child is taken away, he goes after the church. Jesus, I mean, we're going to be able to see what's behind the attack. Why is the church physically being accosted? Why within the church do you have people that hate true gospel preachers? They hate you. They don't want you around. They don't want you to be in that church. They don't want you to be a part of that church because you're taking away their satanic desires. You're fighting against a satanic warfare. You're going up against it. This is why Paul in Ephesians 6 talks about putting on the armor of God, that we're fighting not flesh and blood, but principalities and powers in heavenly places. So chapters 1 through 11, if you want to read the whole book, just break it down in the first 11 chapters. Man attacking us, physical things going on in the world, attacking the true believers. Then the true believers find out in chapters 12 through 22, there is a satanic policy of evil that is backing up Babylon, the beast, and so on. You'll see why the attacks are taking place. Okay, so that's the dragon. And interestingly enough, we're introduced to the order of things, the dragon, and all the way down to the fake believers that take the sign of the beast, the law-keeping fake believers. You know what they do? They're attacking the church within the church, and we'll see that going on. Well, when they're destroyed in the reverse order of how they're introduced to us, which is interesting. So you can keep that straight. 7 bowls. I know you guys know the number 7 is complete. I think 54 times the word 7 is used in the book of Revelation. Obviously, we're using a symbolic number to talk about completeness. Then we get the fall of Babylon, chapters 17 through 19. And then the great consummation, the great judgment, chapters 20 through 22. Each of these sections, okay, we'll do it one more time and then we'll close. There are 7 sections. They parallel each other. All right. And there are 2 divisions in the book of Revelation broken down for a purpose. One, the physical attack, the physical persecution, and then the second section, chapter 12 and following, that there's a satanic policy of evil behind the physical attacks. And then we see the great white throne judgment, and we eventually see all the enemies of the church, the true believers, all of them destroyed. There's revenge in the end. But remember, symbolic language, there definitely is symbolism. Will God be sitting on an actual physical throne? Will it be great and white? No, that's symbolism. Does that speak of a particular event at a particular time by a particular person? Yes, absolutely. That's coming. When Jesus is introduced to us in the beginning, is that the coming of Jesus Christ when he came incarnated the first time? Yes. Particular time, place, event, absolutely. That's symbolic, though. He's not got hair that's on fire, but absolutely true. Then there's symbolic language throughout the whole book in between, and each of that, all that symbolic language is not trying to talk about a particular person in a particular place, in a particular church, in a particular event. That's how people make movies. They sell books. That is not how you should read the book of Revelation. So if you're looking for theological terms, the way I'm approaching it is sort of semi-preterism, semi-futurist. What does that mean? That means that it's easy and it would be accurate to say, yes, this event that's happening in the church, this natural disaster that's happening, the earthquakes, the tsunamis, the massive fires, those are judgments of God trying to warn us in a physical way of the spiritual reality of the coming doom and judgment and wrath of God that is coming spiritually for all of eternity. So how many events of that? Well, hundreds, thousands of those events take place. So you could say those events took place. Those were the fulfillment of the book of Revelation. Yeah, because it's circular parallelism. It's ongoing. It's not happening at one time. It's ongoing events. And then will it happen in the future? You bet you. It actually will continue to happen until the consummation of all things in the end, when everything is finally destroyed. Uh, we're not looking for this 7 years of tribulation where we're all removed. Will the church be protected? Yes, absolutely, it will be. We see that all the time. But will the church have martyrs? Will there be people died? Yes. Killed? Yes, absolutely. There's what? They're all in white robes and they're martyred for their faith. Uh, so we want to try to unpack all of that, but we don't want to get bogged down trying to figure out and treat it like an allegory. Else, the book of Revelation is not a blessing anymore. It's basically a contest to see who can make it the most interesting book by picking out which country is which and which symbol is like. Boy, I think the dragon represents the helicopters because the United States Air Force has a dragon on the front of their helicopters. So therefore, that must be the dragon that's coming to destroy. Uh, it gets so crazy that we end up having Satan in the place of where Christ should be, and Christ in the place of where Satan should be. That's how ridiculous we get with this. And the book of Revelation was never intended to be read that way, guys. I'm not trying to pick on anyone. My goal is not to try to point out who's teaching it wrong. I can tell you this, I have taught it wrong in my life. So let's just pick on me and leave everybody else alone. But I'm thankful to have run across people like Hendrickson, R.C. Sproul, and G.K. Beale, and many others. If you want more names of more books, more commentaries, people you can get, I'll be happy to recommend them to you. Well, that's an intro. I know we didn't get into any specifics, didn't intend to, because you haven't had a chance to read it. So read the first 3 chapters. Let's talk about that, or just read the whole book. It didn't take me long this last time, and I'm not the fastest reader in the world. 22 chapters will take you an hour and 15 minutes to read through it. If you just read it straight through, make a few notes, jot down a few notes, maybe questions, observations, but hopefully that helps you to break down the chapters a little bit. Remember, 12 through 14 starts that new division, 1 through 3, and then 12 through 14 starts the 2 divisions of Revelation, and then 4 through 7, 8 through 12, and then or 8 through 10, and then you'll get really 10 and 11 together, and then we got 12 through 14, and after that, people get different. They break it down a little bit differently, but 20 through 22, obviously, when you read it, is going to go together. So if you want to put 15 through 19, some people will do, 15 and 16 together, 17 through 19. But there's going to be 7 sections before we're done. I believe that's the way it was supposed to be broken down, because 7, of course, is the number of this book. And so hopefully it's been helpful to you. I just wanted to take half an hour and lay all that out and almost just kind of whet your appetite for it. I think it will be such a blessing when we see it in a semi-preterist, semi-futurist, circular parallelism, broken down into those 2 divisions, 7 sections, each section retelling the same time, which is from the first coming of Christ to the last coming of Christ. Okay? So now read it with that in mind and see if the Spirit of God doesn't bless you, because He promised He would. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back with you again on Wednesday. Let's do some Revelation reading. Lord bless you. Lord bless you. I love you in the Lord. Thank you for being a believer. And I know, based on the book of Revelation, you'll have your challenges in so many ways, as I do. So if the creek rises for this old sinner boy, then I'll see you at Jesus' feet. All right. Bye now.